Greetings, America, on this cloudy, rainy, cool southeastern North Carolina day. It's April Fool's Day. However, I will not be playing any pranks today. Again, so much that could be discussed, and at the unfortunate consequences of repeating myself and discussing some of the same topics, what I'd like to do is eventually leave you with a question that it would be nice to see if we can get some responses. Um, so, since my last video, what's new? Um, well, let's see. We've had a couple of mass shootings. We had the one in Denver. No, not Denver. I'm sorry. We had the one. Um, I apologize. I can't seem to think of where it was at, but the gentleman who shot up the massage parlors for supposedly it was a massage parlor that gave the happy ending, if you get my drift. And legacy media and the modern day big tech companies went with Asian hate crime, which again attributing intent and attributing motive and uh, giving context where perhaps the context was incorrect. And once again, that's a dangerous precipice. Then we had the mass shooting in Colorado, um, and again, uh, legacy media, big tech companies, again, took control of the narrative, took control of the context, um, tried to leave out certain features because, for whatever reason, the one thing that is consistent, and it's not whether you're on the right or the left. It's not whether you vote blue or red. Um, what I'm asking is for people to look at things objectively with, just a shred of common sense. Um, the gentleman was apparently an anti-Trumper, a Biden supporter, and for all intents and purposes, either Middle Eastern or a Muslim extremist or some variation of that. Uh, and I'm not entirely sure what his motives were. And an officer of the law sacrificed his life to attempt to preserve law and protect people. Um, but of course, that gets very little attention. And because the gentleman in question, who was the shooter, was not white, at first they tried to paint him as white, but then when the facts came out that he was not classically white, as far as Christian, whatever the case may be, um, they immediately switched the narrative to the discussion of gun control, so on and so forth. Which, then of course the internet takes over, and you see all these jokes and these memes. I'm not, can I take away your car because other people have driven drunk? Can I take away your vehicle or your cell phone because other people have texted and drove and killed people with it? I mean, the logic is there, but the only cogent argument I've ever heard is that the reason guns get such a bad rap is because what they were specifically designed for. And that's the only cogent argument I've ever heard. Um, so I'll leave that one alone. Then, of course, we have and forgive me if I mispronounce his name, the Derek Chauvin trial, which is underway. We have the two teenage girls who carjacked a 60-something-year-old gentleman, an Uber Eats driver in the DC metro area. Just on the surface, those are good enough. Two teenage girls, um, in an attempt to carjack a 60-something-year-old Uber Eats, 60-something-year-old man who was an Uber Eats driver, uh, who was subsequently killed as a result of, uh, I'm trying to think of what the terms would be, but aggravated assault, grand theft auto, uh, vehicular manslaughter, negligent manslaughter, because I don't think these girls intended to kill the gentleman. I don't know the facts or the context as far as whether they did violence, whether they were violent towards the man, or whether they were just being a couple of teenage jackasses that were just attempting to, what's the word I'm looking for? Do something stupid. Anybody who's lived through their teens and their early 20s knows what it's like to potentially do some stupid stuff and then look back, later in life like, what the hell was I doing? But as you dig a little deeper, it would turn out that the 13 and the 15-year-old girl were black, and the elderly man in question was a Pakistani immigrant. And those two things seem to cancel themselves out when it comes to legacy media, when it comes to the left, when it comes to the woke, when it comes to big tech companies, as far as the narrative they're pushing. And what ended up happening is, I think the DC police chief or something was calling it an accident, and the girls won't be charged with murder and blah blah blah, because it doesn't suit the modern day narrative of the 21st century, the third decade of the 21st century. And I keep repeating that because it's worth mentioning. If you ever go back and you look at some books that were published in like the late 70s, early 80s, etc., where people were theorizing about what the 2000s would look like, what the 21st century would look like, I don't think we're as evolved as some of these people would have imagined. And then, of course, you have the Derek Chauvin trial over the death of Mr. Floyd. And I didn't know Mr. Floyd. I don't know his life's work. I don't know the sum total of his cumulative life actions. You're going to have people on one side that are going to consider him a martyr, and you're going to have other people on another side who will dig up facts to support another narrative, which is he was a piece of garbage. I would like to stay in the middle, and I would like to know objectively what kind of person he was. Thanks in part to Steven Crowder with his show Louder with Crowder. I was able to watch some of the body cam footage, and what I can tell you is this: from the body cam footage alone, Mr. Floyd clearly seemed to be under the influence of something, or if not under the influence, clearly in an altered mental state. In which case, during the whole ordeal that was caught on body cam footage, his altered mental state caused him to resist. Every attempt they made to put him in the back of the police car, he would obstruct the officer's abilities to do so by either making himself bigger, flailing out his limbs, and you could clearly see the officers did not want to cause unnecessary harm to him by breaking limbs, bending limbs, forcing him into the car as he was attempting to resist. At which point, again, I can't speak for law enforcement because I've never been there, but in the military, I know what it's like when we're trying to detain somebody and the mob starts to crowd around you. You don't know if the mob is armed, you don't know what the mob's intent is, but you feel a genuine sense of concern for your well-being, while at the same time trying to detain a subject where, I don't know if I want to go there, but basically, time is of the essence. You've got to detain the subject, you got to get him out of Dodge, and you can't give the mob time to build up their anger to the point where they decide they want to act on it. For those who want to play the Monday morning quarterback, and for those who want to, play that hindsight 2020, here's what I can say. In a situation like that, if law enforcement had the capacity to call some sort of quick reaction force that deals specifically with people in an altered mental state, people who are not ideally suited to get in the back of a police cruiser, say a larger capacity vehicle where, regardless of the person trying to make themselves big, the opening to this vehicle is large enough to sustain somebody who's attempting to resist. I think in the day they used to call it a paddy wagon. Because from what I could see with Mr. Floyd and his mannerisms and his behavior, he was clearly in an altered state. He was clearly under the influence of something. And according to Mr. Crowder and his show, Mr. Floyd, the medical examiner in Minneapolis, said that Mr. Floyd had a significant amount of fentanyl in his system. I don't know that to be true. I don't know if that'll come out in the trial. But of course, in the 21st century, legacy media and the big tech companies are pushing this narrative that, it was a bunch of neo-Nazi, white supremacist, KKK police officers that, go to secret meetings and plot against minorities, and, you know, they've entered into the police force to put themselves in a position to harass and uh, oppress minorities, and that was simply not the case. Apparently, within the city limits of Minneapolis, St. Paul, it's a law that's on the books that if someone is caught passing a counterfeit bill, it's an automatic arrest slash detainment for the purpose of questioning to ascertain I am guessing, the source of counterfeit cash. You don't like it, vote to change those laws. Um, but here's why I bring it up. So between legacy media and big tech in the 21st century, we have this concept of context control and narrative forming. In other words, ensuring that the stories being pushed out provide the context to frame the narrative that supports a specific socio-political agenda, which, from my perspective as a heterosexual Caucasian male, appears as though you want to build up the anger within the non-white community, the non-male community, the non-heterosexual community. You want to build up the victim status. You want to ferment the anger, and you want to basically push this concept that the government is pro-white, anti-everybody else. The government is pro-heterosexuality, anti-everybody else. And when I say heterosexuality, I include all the other labels as far as like transgender and whatnot. And the government is like anti-female, uh, and therefore, by extension, police forces, etc. Um, so in that context, I think it's very dangerous that these entities are attempting to form narratives and control the story. There's numerous educated people out there who have lectured and written on the concept of controlling the masses through sources like the media, controlling their thoughts by uh, what information you put out there, like an information campaign. The military does it consistently. When you're trying to fight a counterinsurgency, you try to win over the hearts and minds of the local populace. Um, so that builds to my question, and that is, what is the ultimate end game? What is the ultimate chess move? Because when you play chess, you're not thinking of your next move. You're thinking about your next 7 or 8 moves, and you're thinking about your opponent's next 7 or 8 moves, because ultimately you're looking for that checkmate. You're looking to isolate the king and give him no more moves where your opponent has nothing else to do but to surrender. So if we just pretend for 1 second to just simplify the conversation and say the left, okay, or entities within the left, what is the ultimate checkmate? What is the goal? What is the ultimate agenda? Based on the narratives, based on the framing of context, based on the perceived agenda, what is the ultimate checkmate? And I think that's a fair question, because you don't have to agree with me. You can disagree. You can disagree passionately, and by all means, get involved, have a conversation, comment, respond, say something. But I'll give you an opinion here. I think what is extremely dangerous is, in the 21st century, attempting create this aura of evil, whereas white people are evil, heterosexuals are evil, males are evil, and then by extension, people who lean towards the right, pro free speech, pro Second Amendment, whether you're pro life, whatever the case may be, any of those hot button issues. What I'm trying to find out is what is the final chess move? What is the checkmate? Is it a race war? Is it white versus everybody who's not white? I mean, we've reached a point now where the left is attempting to make Asians victims, and not in a good way, because technically speaking, the left has begun the process years and years ago of blaming the Asians. Well, when they've done that, now they've created Asians as victims, so now they're promoting the Asian victimhood, because they've been promoting the black victimhood, they've been promoting the brown victimhood, they've been promoting the LGBTQXY to the third whatever victimhood. So what is the ultimate chess move here? I can only think of one, and that is potentially some form of conflict, some civil war, some culminating point, because at some point you're gonna push people. I got off my ass to make these videos because a guy that I went to high school with, who happens to be of Asian descent, made some pretty inflammatory comments from a political standpoint, which is typically out of character for him. If you know him, you'd understand. But he made some pretty inflammatory comments, and if he could reach his culminating point and make statements like that, and he's a pretty level-headed, he's a pretty even-keeled person, and his comments were very, very pro-left, almost extreme left. It makes me wonder, what is it like for the rest of society? And that's ultimately my question is, what is the ultimate goal? What is the conclusion? And that's what scares me. But I'm very, and I've mentioned this numerous times. It's not the first time I've asked this question, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. So if you have taken the time to watch this, I do appreciate it. But yeah, please get involved. Let's have these conversations, because if we don't, all right, and I'm not saying let's make these videos viral or anything like that. I could care less. But if we don't recognize that some of us with a more level head need to meet in the middle, and that we can still disagree on certain topics but not dehumanize and demonize each other, then maybe we can prevent the quote-unquote mind control, if you will, where we're allowing big tech and legacy media to control the context and control the narrative and control what we think. Because I think the vast majority of us are better than that, and I think the vast majority of us are more rational than that. But it's not going to happen unless we attempt to meet in the middle and have these discussions. But who am I? I'm just a ginger without a soul, I guess. So please, by all means, leave a comment, get a hold of me, whether it's on Instagram, Facebook, leave a comment on YouTube. I did have a comment on one of my videos, but I can't find it anymore, so I don't know if the author of that comment took it down for a reason. I've attempted to reach out to the author, and I don't know if they're ignoring me or if they're just not paying attention to the sources of which I'm using to communicate with them. So obviously I'm not using their name for a reason, because I'm just not. But by all means, other than that, if you like the video, hit like. If you want to see more of these videos, hit the bell or hit the subscription button. Other than that, that's all I got.